What the Sam Hill's going on here?
The Rewatch Podcast presents the Lois and Clark Rewatch, dedicated to the series Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman on ABC. Join us each week as we investigate the origins of the Man of Steel and uncover crime in Metropolis. Send your feedback to the Rewatch Podcast at gmail.com. Join us on Facebook at facebook.com/rewatchpodcast or follow us on Twitter at rewatchpod.
Oh, hey! Let's get back to it.
And welcome back to the Rewatch Podcast and our Lois and Clark Rewatch. I'm Corey.
And I'm Jonathan Kent's dress.
I knew it.
The truth comes out right here on the Rewatch Podcast. You heard it first.
Thank you for joining us, everyone. Of course, we're here discussing 2 more episodes of Lois and Clark, and this week's headline reads, "Glow home, man."
Glow home, man. Dude.
Yes, we are discussing the green glow of home and the Man of Steel bars. But first, before we get into it, bit of a follow-up.
Yeah, so basically, we had said, like, I think it was in the either the first episode or our episode 0, we talked about the continuity in Lois and Clark, and it was kind of, our reactions kind of laughed because there's not, like, as far as continuity goes, things do change in Lois and Clark. I didn't want to say too much because I wasn't sure how much you remember, but there are recast characters along the way.
Right.
One pretty big recast, but then some other minor character recast that come up later. So obviously that's not exactly continuity there, and they do change the character's backstory a little bit on those as well. So not really continuity there, but I remember the thing when I said continuity, I meant things like having multi-episode arcs, storylines that don't just finish at the end of the episode. So far at this point, you could watch any episode of Lois and Clark in any order. Really, you could. It's not a big deal. That's something that Sliders really, you could watch just about any episode of Sliders and you wouldn't really be too confused. There wasn't like one that said to be continued to the next episode, except for just a small handful, of episodes. And then even later when it went off the rails, and we had an overarching villain like Rickman or, the Cro-Mags later on, still you could sort of interchange those episodes a little bit and be okay. But I remember later on, there's several storylines that come up in Lois and Clark that you kind of have to watch them in order to really get what's happening in the story because of how they put it all together. So that's why I said about the continuity in Lois and Clark, like multi-episode arcs, instead of just having it all contained within one 44-minute show. I like the idea that they're going to spread that out over, multiple episodes because it lets you tell a bigger story. That's what I was talking about as far as Lois and Clark's continuity. That's what I meant.
Yeah, it kind of makes me think of Star Trek Next Generation, still firmly in an episodic structure, but still, slightly overarching. There's a tinge of it. I think the only show that I can think of from around this time that kind of steered away from the episodic structure was Twin Peaks.
Right.
It ran for 2 seasons, very much an overarching story across each season. Really steered clear of an episodic structure. But right. Yeah, these shows are still, early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, still sticking with episodic structures. And it continued right through, like, Sliders, which went right up until 2000, and then it wasn't really until we got, like, shows like Lost, things like that were really all about the overarching story.
Yeah, exactly. Try watching that one out of order.
Exactly.
You'll be, even more confused than most people were.
Yeah, exactly. I've seen the whole series, and I'm still a bit sketchy on a few points.
Yeah, I've rewatched that one a couple times, and there's still some things like, wait a second, what? Okay. I know what's coming too.
And of course, the landscape of television today is just beyond expectation. It's just, so good now that it's never been seen before the way it is now. So.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. I get what you're saying. We're still going to sort of get like an overarching kind of story here, but yeah, it's still very episodic.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get into our first episode discussion for today. The episode is The Green Glow of Home.
I like that title.
Yeah, I wonder what this one's about. Written by Bryce Zabel and directed by Les Landau, and this originally aired on November 14th of 1993.
Yeah, just a minute. Martha, it's Wayne Eyrick. Put on the coffee. Come on in, Wayne.
Better out here.
What are you doing out on a night like this?
You know that big oak tree I got out back?
Yeah?
Tuesday's storm blew it right out of the ground.
You need some help chopping it up?
Oh no. I found something under that tree. It was a rock, and I sent a little piece off to the lab for a test. Today, I got federal agents asking me a lot of questions, and they got bulldozers coming tomorrow. That's all I know. I need you to keep this for me until I can figure it all out.
What do you think it is?
Something I never seen before. I mean, it is something weird. Here.
Wayne Eyrig, a friend of the Kent family, discovers a strange glowing green rock which results in some, quote, government men snooping around asking questions, prompting Perry to send Lois and Clark to Smallville to find out the story behind the story. When Jonathan shows Clark the rock, he immediately starts to feel sick and experiences a loss of his powers. The government men turn out to be headed by Jason Trask, the former Bureau 39 head, determined to find and imprison Superman, who he theorizes has a connection to the Kents, given that his spaceship was found in Smallville at the same time Clark was born. He manages to eventually take Lois and Clark prisoner, who later tells Trask he is Superman under threat of his parents' death. But with the loss of his powers, he panics when Trask raises a gun and threatens to shoot him, convincing Trask that Superman isn't afraid of bullets, so Clark cannot be Superman. Trask ties up Ma and Pa Kent along with Eyrig and plans a fire in the hopes it will bring Superman around to save them. Meanwhile, Jimmy has arrived, sent by Perry in order to get photos of what has turned out to be a major story. When Lois escapes her own imprisonment with the help of Sherman, she asks Jimmy to warn Superman about the possible danger of the green rock, and he uses his new hypersonic signal watch, which Clark hears, indicating his own powers have returned. He promptly escapes his bonds, extinguishes the fire, saving his family and Eyrig, and faces off Trask, who exposes him to the rock again. Depowered once again, Clark must use his regular human strength in a fight that ends up with Trask ready to shoot Clark, but luckily the sheriff shows up and shoots Trask first. Lois and Clark return to the planet where the story is written, with Lois and Clark naming the rock Kryptonite.
I kind of expected you to come alone.
Well, what's the problem, Dad?
They're not looking for pesticides up the road, Clark. Wayne Eyrick found a rock on his property last week. Sent a sample of it over to Wichita for analysis. And the feds showed up.
That doesn't make any sense, Dad. I mean, why go through all this trouble for a rock?
Because the preliminary report said it was some kind of meteorite. Wayne thought it might be worth money. He gave it to me for safekeeping. Since federal types were giving him such a hard time. So I figure, since we found it a few miles from where we found you, it was probably related.
Dad, I'm feeling kind of strange.
My God, you think it could be this? Clark, what's happening? What's wrong, son? Clark.
Martha!
Oh, my boy.
Okay, so iReactions has really hooked us up with a fair bit of trivia here.
Rachel, the sheriff, was originally supposed to be Lana Lang, which, you know, as we know today, that's like a his quote friend / girlfriend from when he was a young man. In
Makes
Smallville.
a lot of sense. Yeah.
But they didn't have the rights to use that character, which you might think, what the heck, you know? It's Superman, but technically, here's what happened. The Superman film and TV rights were owned by the Salkinds, which if you watch the old Christopher Reeve movies, you see, you know, up there, I think it says produced by Alexander Salkind or something like that. But they sold those. They sold the rights to the Superman film and TV things off, and they were done. But they said that Superboy was a different character than Superman, and they said that we retained the rights to Superboy and all the characters that they created for the Superboy era. So they own the rights to Lana and Pete Ross and anyone they created for the Superboy timeline. So that's why they couldn't use it in this one, because it wasn't approved by the Salkinds.
There you go.
It's a funny thing how rights work. You know, it's like.
Yeah, it's like how Fox can put out a Deadpool movie because technically Deadpool belongs in the X-Men universe, yeah?
Right. Superboy, it's funny, my autocorrect on my notes here corrected Superboy in every time to the word superbly.
Random.
What the heck? Like, all right. So the Superboy actor was Gerard Christopher. Actually, there was a guy before him, I remember, that Gerard Christopher, I think, replaced, or maybe it was vice versa, but whatever. So Gerard Christopher was the Superboy actor that most people really, really loved. You know, like they really liked him. They thought he did a good job portraying Superboy different than Clark. You know, it was more of like the Christopher Reeve thing where Clark was sort of nerdy, and then Superboy was the strong, confident man. And fans weren't liking that Dean Cain was cast in this role instead of Gerard Christopher, because he had done it before. He's a proven actor, so it was kind of like there was some backlash to that. Plus, the Superboy show had better costuming. Like the costume looked more like Christopher Reeve's, and the effects were just better, which is you think would be odd because it was only like a 22-minute show, but that gives them an advantage too. They don't have to worry about a longer show trying to fill it up with whatever, like trying to make the story bigger and more epic than a 22-minute show. So it was a little bit, it was more beloved than Lois and Clark was really at first.
Did not realize that.
Yeah, I didn't realize that either. I remember watching the Superboy show, and I was like, oh, this isn't too bad, but it was really short. When you come to a half-hour show, that's like 22, 23 minutes of show to watch. It goes by very quickly, and the stories are not, like, I don't remember any of the main stories. I remember the actors. I remember Lana Lang for sure. I was a young man, what can I say? But it was not, like, it wasn't anything that, like, I remember in my mind like I do Lois and Clark. Like, these stories really, I don't know, either resonated with me and they stuck in my memory, whereas the Superboy ones just didn't for some reason.
Well, plus Lois and Clark are kind of doing their own thing here, so you don't want to really link it too heavily to anything that's come before.
So now we got some actually deleted scenes from the scripts. So Clark tells Jimmy, you know what, it's better to ask first, referring to how Jimmy had the Superman, the hypersonic watch. He pressed it and it made that loud ringing noise. And in the episode, he says, maybe we should only use this in an emergency. But in this one, he says, like my mother always said, just maybe ask him first. Don't use this watch. And there was a little line there from Jimmy about, well, it's a great mother you have there, Clark, that type of thing. There was a cheesy map travel effect, like a la Indiana Jones, when you see the map and the plane is traveling with the red line.
Well, they did that when he flew over to China to get some food, remember?
Exactly. They were going to do that again this episode to show that Lois and Clark were flying to Smallville. And as they land, as the plane gets to Smallville, you're going to hear Clark's voice say, "It's America's breadbasket, Lois." It just, to me, it felt a little cheesy reading that. I was like, I'm glad they got
Instead,
that.
Let's just save our budget and just have them drive there.
Exactly. Ma and Pa embarrass Clark when he brings Lois in. like, oh, Lois, we've heard all about you. We feel like we know you already. And she's like, what do you mean? Well, Clark talks about you all the time, how you're so pretty, and he's like, Mom, and, being a good writer. And it's like, it was a good scene. It was a funny scene.
I do kind of like the way that Martha behaves when Lois shows up, though. I think it's a bit more subtly embarrassing.
Yeah,
if you will.
Is, definitely. And they suggest that Lois stays with them, but she's, no, I'll just get a hotel. It's no big deal. And she's like, no, there's no way we can let you stay in a hotel. You're our guest. So that's how she ended up staying there with them.
Nice.
Lois's dress, when she changes into that more Smallville type dress, that wasn't in the script. It was just not even in there. There was no mention of it. Instead, they were just standing around watching the people dance at that little hoedown. And Lois actually pulls Clark out. She says, come on, let's go dance, because she obviously knows how to do it. So I don't know. I kind of like the way they did it in the actual show. There's something I have a problem with, but we'll mention that later.
Well, it does. It grows the connection between Clark and Lois.
Yeah.
Just because Lois wears pantsuits and is,
Right.
a strong, successful reporter, it's not beneath her to put on a nice small town dress and go to a hoedown, So the love is growing.
Lois makes a comment on Clark being so relaxed. She says, like, I never see you so relaxed. You're so Clark. And he says, well, that's who I am. I'm Clark. You know, which, kind of we talked about before how he says he is Clark and Superman is the disguise, so.
Yeah. Oh, and we came off the Invisible Man episode, the I'm Seeing Through You episode, where he was feeling invisible to Superman. So,
exactly.
It's nice.
There was a extended scene. Well, actually, no, it's a cut scene of Jimmy on stakeout at Irig's farm, and it was supposed to imply that he had spent a little bit of time there before going to the sheriff, because there's like fast food trash all around him, and he has his camera, and obviously he's trying to spy on what's going on, and suddenly the scene ends with him taking lots of pictures all of a sudden. So something is happening there at the farm.
I did find it a bit odd that they're bringing out Clark in those shackles, and suddenly it's just like Jimmy's just there,
exactly.
set up and ready to go, and you're like, oh, when did he arrive?
Yeah, there was a little more setup for that. And Jimmy, there's more of a scene with him and the sheriff, and he asks the sheriff, "Have you ever fired that gun before?" And she says, "Of course I've fired this gun before." And then she says, at the gun range, so she's never actually had to use it, which kind of makes sense,
small town.
In Smallville. Yeah. And then she asks Jimmy, says, does that Lois love Clark? And Jimmy says, well, she loves her work, which is true. It's a nice little scene there, but this would have worked really good if they had the rights to the Lana character. That would have been a great line, because obviously they were involved before. So
yeah.
At the very end, after the sheriff shoots Trask, she was supposed to look at her gun like shocked that she actually fired it. Just like, oh my God, I've done it. I did this. I never thought I would have to.
I had to kill someone in the line of duty.
Exactly.
A bit more full on, maybe.
I'm gonna make a little deal with you, Clark. Trusting your stay in Metropolis has put some sense in your head. You give up the alien, and I will let you live.
What makes you think that I would do that, even if I could?
Because Superman came to Smallville about the same time you were born. There has to be a connection. Now, tell me and live.
There's nothing to tell. I'm learning all of this for the first time right now.
I'm trying to save humanity from an alien invader.
You have no proof of that, Trask.
All right. There's another possibility. Perhaps this alien has taken over your mind. Perhaps he has infused you with his power.
Nobody has infused me with power, and nobody has taken over my mind.
We've got a location on Irik. He's heading down the access road to the home of a Jonathan Kent.
Clark, why didn't you tell me this was a family affair?
All right, so let's get into the main story here. All right, so the big lead, of course, Wayne Irig, the neighbor. Big storm had come through earlier and knocked over a tree. And under that tree, he finds this big chunk of green glowing rock. And he sent it off for analysis because he wasn't sure what it was. And now government people are coming to his property. They want to know something, and it's kind of made him edgy. So it's the part that kind of sets off the whole episode. Kryptonite. We're bringing in this kryptonite. And I think it's interesting how it plays out, because he shows up at Jonathan Kent's farm.
Right.
Tells him the whole bit, what's going on. Says, I need to leave this with you because I'm worried what these government guys are going to do with it. And as it plays out, and he talks to Clark about it, and of course it reveals what the kryptonite's going to do to Clark, Jonathan already has his suspicions about what this is. Because when he opens up the box to show Clark, he's kind of talking as if he knows that it's connected to Clark in some way, right?
Right.
So, I found that aspect of it, Jonathan and Martha Kent aren't just backwoods Kansas folk. They're smart people. They're on the ball.
Oh, yeah, they are. They definitely are, yeah. Now, the thing I gotta say is that I just did not, when Jonathan shows Clark the kryptonite, I gotta say, though, the acting on his part was not really great. He's like looking at the rock, he opens it up, and Clark starts feeling sick. And Jonathan continues to stare at the rock, and he's like, my God, do you think it could be this?
Yeah.
And I'm like, wouldn't you, if your son said he was sick, wouldn't you turn and look and like, what the heck, you know? It's just, I was like, that's always bothered me. I was like, God, what the heck is going on there with that little scene? I mean, it's a good scene. It's just like, I don't know, maybe he was having an off day or whatever. It's just a weird choice to continue looking at the rock and not reference that your son has just, you know, sort of falling over next to you.
Yeah, it's actually, I thought it was a bit weird because, yeah, that point where he's just like, gee, do you think it might be this? And I'm like, that's stilted. But
Yes.
when he notices that Clark has gone down and he's screaming out for Martha to come, like,
Right.
I thought that was pretty good. I thought,
Yeah,
I
that
felt
was
the
good.
emotion behind that. But I'm like, 2 seconds ago, you were just like, it's like you weren't even in the scene, man. You were just calling that line in.
Yeah, and let's not bury the lead here to speak newspaper talk. We've got Jerry Hardin here playing Wayne Eyrig.
Yes, we've seen him before.
Yeah,
in
we've
Sliders.
seen him in Sliders. In one of the best episodes ever. No, he played an author in that one, but of course we know him mostly from X-Files.
Yes, Deep Throat.
Yeah. So it's cool to see him. I always, whenever he shows up, it's like, oh, this is cool. A nice little icing on the cake, you know, for the episode.
So, you know, a bit of cachet there.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
I think 93 is probably the same year as X-Files, right? X-Files
I
started in
believe
about
it was.
93.
Yeah, I think that's when X-Files came out.
Yeah. And Jerry Hardin, of course, was featured prominently in the first season.
Oh, yeah. Oh, 1993. Yep.
Yeah, there you go.
Same era.
So, yeah, definitely good to see him here as Wayne Eyrig. The whole thing comes around that Clark and Lois are going to travel to Smallville. Clark sort of gets wind of what's going on over there, and at this point it's more like the government is almost forcing Wayne off his property so they could do, you know, ecological tests or whatever the excuse they're coming up with to, you know, go and try and find kryptonite, ostensibly. So Clark manages to talk Perry into letting him and Lois go and cover this story. Sure, it's the Daily Planet, and this is only something that's happening in Smallville, but yeah, Clark kind of sells it as something that's probably a bit more, you know, the little man being bullied by the government in a way, right?
Right. Exactly.
You know, we were talking in the follow-ups there about overarching stories. A big overarch here. It's Trask again.
Yes.
And Bureau 39.
As much as we hate the character, I like the character of Trask. I think it's a neat character to have in the story. I'm sorry to see him go after this episode, but it was cool. It was cool to have him back.
Now, I can't quite remember, but even though Trask is gone, I don't think we're quite done with Bureau 39, though, are we?
Oh, you know, maybe not. Maybe not. I'm trying to remember back. I think there was something else that refers to that later on.
And we still haven't gotten back to the orb.
Right. Oh, yeah, that's right. The orb, yes.
Clark found in the Bureau 39 warehouse. So
right, yeah.
I think we're not quite done yet. You know, this all takes place. Jonathan, reveals the kryptonite to Clark, and it, of course, hurts him. And he just loses his powers. I thought this was maybe a little bit inconsistent because, I mean, he's exposed to the kryptonite for, a minute? And then when he gets his powers back later, he's, really exposed to that kryptonite. It's, right in front of him.
Right,
He's down on
yes.
the ground. Trask just puts it down next to him. And he still sort of manages to, he loses his power again, but he sort of brings up enough strength to actually physically fight the man.
Yeah, they're probably they're trying to figure out maybe exactly how it works. Maybe that's why it seems a little inconsistent. I don't know. They have that scene where he is trying, he's walking around with Lois, and he tries to win the prize with the hammer over the, you hit the bell. And
the old strongman hammer thing.
Yeah, which he couldn't do earlier, and then he's with Lois and he tries it, and it almost goes, and then he gathers up his strength and tries it again. And I wasn't sure, and he actually gets it that time. I wasn't sure if that was supposed to indicate that he was starting to get his powers back or not. I don't know if that makes sense there or not, but that's what I thought originally when I first watched it.
I think going by the episode, that he really doesn't get his powers back until he hears Jimmy's supersonic watch thing, right?
Yeah,
that's when he can break free from the chains and all that. So it takes a while for him to get all that strength back.
I don't know. I think they're just trying to figure out exactly how this kryptonite works. There was something on the FOLC wiki about it exactly what you said. At first, it takes away his powers completely after being exposed to it, and then at the end he's exposed again, and then they're it's basically the same thing you said, and they didn't really have an explanation for it, except that maybe that they were just saying that now that he's been exposed to it twice, maybe he's starting to build up a little more of a tolerance, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I mean, and I'm nitpicking here because this was a really good episode. You know? So I can let it go. But yeah, it just felt a little bit inconsistent. Okay, so we've also got this woman, Carol Sherman, who is played by L. Scott Caldwell.
Which we know from...
From Lost.
From Lost.
We were just talking about Lost.
Rose.
She played Rose.
Yes.
So great to see her here. I don't quite understand why Bureau 39 hired her, though.
Yeah.
They could have just got a Bureau 39 employee to do the job that she was doing. But it seems that, like, the way she comes in and she notices that they're interrogating Irig, right? And she's like, this isn't what I signed on for.
Yeah.
So Trask has to, like, blackmail her by saying, like, oh, really? You don't want to help us? Well, don't you have a daughter? And, you know, stuff like that. And she's just like, you know, I needed a job, but this is what I wanted to do. And I'm like, what? Did they put out, like, an ad in the paper? Henchmen needed?
I know.
It was it was a bit weird.
I was thinking that maybe she was an actual government person. You know, maybe she was an actual government person that they needed, so they actually could get the actual government forms to go into Smallville, you know, legally. But then when she says that, you know, I needed a job, it's like, well, if you're a government person, you have a job already.
Exactly.
I assume. Unless maybe she was like retired already or out of it or fired for some reason. I don't know. I'm just trying to figure it out. It's like, well, we'll just go with it. We'll go with it.
Yeah, just by the end, I was like, she's a liability. You shouldn't have hired her in the first place. Just a bit strange. I love the actress. I really do. And she does a perfectly fine job. Just the reasoning behind it. Again, it's a little bit of a nitpick, but I was just like, weird. And, you know, speaking of the interrogation with Irig, you know, they're really putting the screws to him, and he's resisting them for the most part, right?
Apparently pretty good, because he gets the truth serum in him, he gets broken fingers, and he still doesn't reveal anything. So he's got some strong willpower.
And of course, they're just feeding Lois and Clark all this BS about, you know, why they're there and where Irig is. I mean, you know, Sherman's just always like, I don't know where he is. And then, you know, we did find out, I don't know, something about Salt Lake City or something, and they have him call them and tell them that he was in Salt Lake City. And I actually thought it was a funny scene while he's like reading. They cut to him reading what they've you know, written out for him to tell them. And as he says it, he like looks up at the guy like, seriously? Like,
he's like,
you
what
wrote
the hell
this?
Is this? He's like, I can barely tell where I am anymore. It's like, what the hell is this script? Jeez. You're good bad guys, but you're terrible writers. Actually reminds me of the Sliders writers. Good bad guys, but terrible writers. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no. I just thought it was just an interesting bit of subtle humor there.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's what he brings, you know. That's what Jerry Hardin brings to the script, you know. Now I gotta say this: Irig calls Clark and Lois, and you know, they say, all right, well, let's go snoop around, you know, Lois and Clark. We're going to go snoop around Smallville, see what we can see. So they do that a little bit, but then they go to the scene where Clark is suddenly talking with his parents, you know, about the loss of his powers and how he's normal now. And Lois just disappears, but then shows up in this little Smallville dress, this style dress for that town. And it's like, you guys just got a call from Irig. You're supposed to be snooping around, finding information, but instead he's hanging out with his parents and she's off getting the makeover. I thought that was weird. That was like, I think it's just like they could have put that elsewhere, I think, or the fact that the dress wasn't listed in the script is kind of what threw it off for me, maybe.
Yeah, because the dress leads to this like semi-date thing that they have.
Yes, it's like, you guys are trying to find Wayne Irig. You shouldn't be out there, you know, eating cotton candy, playing games, dancing the night away. Like, you got a real problem coming on here. It's like, let's go on a date. Let's forget about everything, you know? Yeah.
But, you know, while they're mucking around, Trask comes up with the idea of saying, like, well, I've interrogated the guy and he's resisting me, so what do? I'll just let him go, see where he leads me. And surely enough, he leads them straight to the Kent's farm.
Exactly.
And I thought, you know, again, I think this is where the acting is, like, superb for Jonathan Kent.
Oh, yeah.
You know, his reactions to what's been happening to Irig, and then the fact that Bureau 39 is coming after him. I just thought this was a great little scene.
Oh, definitely, yeah. It was well done. Well done. Well acted all around.
And then they get tied up and everything, while Trask is trying to bait Superman into showing up. I thought this was really good, too, because Clark actually reveals that he is Superman.
Right.
And you're like, oh my God, he did it. But then, of course, Trask is like, well, let's test this theory.
Yeah.
I'm going to shoot you. Clark knows that his powers are pretty much gone at this point. So he's got a fear of guns.
Yep.
And it's a great little touch. I mean, like, almost immediately after that, it's revealed that he is Superman, and Trask knows this now. But, yeah, it was an interesting little point.
When his powers do come back, I thought it was an interesting use of his powers. You know, because there's a fire there. Rather than use his freeze breath, he inhales the fire and then blows it out as smoke.
Yeah.
I was like, what? That's new. I mean, it's fine, but it just seemed a little bit, you know, like with previous episodes, he would have just blown, you know, the super freeze breath on it and it would have been done. So going for the effect, I guess, you know, like, oh, here's something new, you know, this is something else he can do.
Another point I actually thought was strange is because they've got Jonathan and Martha and Wayne Eyrig tied up there, right? Mm-hmm. And it seems like they purposefully had Eyrig facing away from the door so as, like, not to see what Clark was doing,
well, of course,
in a way.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, that's fair enough. I'll give that to him. But he comes up to untie them and goes, Superman's back. And I'm like... Do you think Eyrig's sitting there going like, what the hell is this kid talking about?
Yeah, that's true. I didn't think about that. Maybe we can assume that he thought Superman flew in and rescued him so that Clark could go and rescue his parents and had to go off to another emergency, maybe. You know?
Maybe.
Or maybe, you know, maybe Eyrig will be so delusional from the loss of blood from having his fingers, you know, broken and stuff.
Been tortured for like 5 days.
Exactly. He won't even remember. Won't even remember.
So, yeah, I know I nitpicked the main story a bit here and there, but all in all, I thought that, you know, the main story here was fantastic.
Yeah, no, this is one of my favorites. You know, I remember this one, you know, clearly from back in the day. It was a good look at Smallville and his upbringing and friends, and it was good. I liked it.
All right, so a few bylines.
All right, so you're saying, how did Jimmy and Kat not know that Clark could hear the supersonic watch? Because he comes over.
Exactly.
It's like, what is that? You know? But I think, the way I'm thinking it, is that, like, he's just sort of, like, walking over and he sees it. Like, you know, in their minds, he just sees them playing around with something. So he's like, what is that? What are you guys messing around with now? I think that's how they probably were thinking. That's why they didn't think, could he hear that? They weren't thinking that. They were thinking that they were just messing around on company time.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I will accept that answer. Again, just something that I noticed that I was like, seriously? They didn't get that he could hear that watch going off? But, all right. I'll go with it. All right. What about Clark's prom date? Now sheriff.
Yeah, this would have worked much better if it was Lana Lang. You know, this would have been a whole new level, you know, to the whole thing. So, you know, it's fine, you know.
And, you know, knowing the Lana Lang character from Smallville, a very different characterization of what the character would have been. I wonder if it was Lana Lang, if they would have played her as this small-town Kansas girl turned sheriff.
Yeah, I wonder, you know, because that's, I mean, in the comics, she is that small-town girl. You know, very different from the TV show Smallville. But she in the comics, she was, you know, small-town girl. Eventually, in the comics, she marries Pete Ross. He goes on to become Luther's vice president when he's elected president. So she becomes like, you know, a government type, you know, female lady person. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but you know, she's in politics with him. She becomes a very strong character during that reign. And then, of course, you know, as comics do, they reboot and change things all the time. So I'm not sure where she is today, but back when I was reading, that's who she was. So she does become a pretty strong character, you know, like a strong story moving forward type character. You know, she wasn't just like always the you know, the country girl. So the way they made her Rachel be the sheriff, you know, I could see them making Lana into the sheriff as well, because she has that potential.
Yeah, and I think they're still playing on, you know, successful independent woman thing here as well.
Oh, yeah,
you know, the fact that she is a relatively young woman. If she, you know, her and Clark went to the prom together, then naturally they're probably the same age. So she's still probably in her mid-20s-ish.
Well, yeah, and they make that point too. When Jimmy comes up, he goes to the man, you know, the older man there, immediately thinking he's the sheriff, you know, and she's like, over here, you know.
Yeah. And then her interplay as well, like when her and Jimmy are racing off, and she goes, "Does Clark ever talk about me?"
Exactly.
Again, just some nice subtle humor thrown throughout the episode.
So now this thing here about Lois, and she, I referred to it as the fish out of water, because she's the big city girl. Now she's suddenly in the small town, and she tries to explain to Martha, and about a fax machine. She goes through the whole explanation, and Martha's like, "Oh, I know. I meant, was there paper in the machine?"
So
like,
good.
She's like, "I don't even have a fax machine," But there's so many cases of this in the episode where she sort of puts her foot in her mouth, or she feels very uncomfortable because she's just not in her element at all out here.
Yeah, I loved Martha's tone as well when Lois notices the painting.
Oh, yeah.
She goes, "No, it's very good. What is it?" She turns around and says, "It's a bowl of fruit."
Obviously.
Obviously, that's what it is.
Oh, there was another thing that I forgot to mention, but there's a scene where Lois and Clark are sitting at the table, and a woman comes over, Maisie, and she's like, "How's the writing going, honey?" And she finds out that everyone knows everyone's business because it's a small town.
Right. Yeah, we got that drop about her novel not being backed up on the floppy disk.
Exactly. So that woman, that Maisie, that's actually Dean Cain's mother.
Yeah. Right.
And I guess,
Nice.
and apparently she's also going to make some more appearances in the rest of the show. Not as Maisie, but as other characters. So she's going to show up again.
I like it. That's a great little bit of trivia.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the famous Smallville Corn Festival. I mean,
Yes.
could you get more Kansas than a corn festival?
Exactly.
Yeah, I didn't mind it. It was a good introduction of getting Lois into Smallville.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to come in, and of course, Lois, big city reporter and all that. Let's bring her into this environment, and not
Right.
only the environment, but a corn festival. And then the interplay with her and Clark as she's trying to make her point about, maybe small towns aren't quite as innocent as people would think.
Yes.
Making the gag about Jonathan Kent
Yeah.
being a crossdresser. I thought it was good. I didn't mind it.
Definitely.
A nice little structure for it. All right, one last thing. We're still going on this Perry trying to stress less.
Yes.
And
It's
this
good.
one, we get him cross-legged and meditating on the floor. But it does lead to him sending Jimmy out into the field. Jimmy
And that's major.
jumps at
That's
his
major.
chance.
He's like, someone had to believe in you, and this is his time to be believed in by Perry. So I thought it was a good progression for the character, because he's been trying to push his stories that he finds interesting, and finally he's out there in the field.
I kind of wish maybe in the ending scene of it that maybe we could have seen that he got some really good photos or something like that that Perry
right.
was really impressed with. Didn't quite get there, but
No.
hey, it's a slow progression for the character, so
Right.
yeah, not bad.
They probably could have added a line from Perry when he's looking at the article or the write-up, and he wants to have a name for the rock. I guess he could have said, that was a good shot of that rock, but we need a name for it. Something like
Right.
that. That would have been nice. And actually, speaking of that rock, speaking of kryptonite, I forgot to mention that the whole kryptonite, the idea of kryptonite, I don't know if you knew this, it came not from the comics, but from the old radio show.
Did not know that.
Yeah, it was actually invented there in the radio show. And I think, if I remember correctly, because like I said, I have those episodes, and it was invented in the radio show. I don't think it was called kryptonite at first. It was some other name at first, but then eventually it became known as kryptonite. And then that was I think right after the show came out. I forget what year that was, but it wasn't a couple years later until they actually brought that into the comics. So it was in the radio show long before it became a part of the comics. And also related to that, so was I think Jimmy was a character from the radio show that they brought into the comics later. He wasn't in the comics at first. I'm not sure about Perry. I know that there was a guy named George Taylor in the comics who was the first boss of Clark Kent, and I'm not sure where Perry came in, if he came in the comics first or if he was in the radio show first. But I know Jimmy was, at least.
Or maybe the kryptonite was originally called kryptonium.
Oh, maybe, yeah.
That would have been a cool tie-in.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I just remember it was in there. It was in there in the early episodes, and it was about a meteor. It was called some Meteor Man or something like that, who was the powered by it or something like that, if I remember correctly. It's been a long time since I listened to him, but yeah, it was good. It was good. So we also have an extra line from Sherman. She's rescuing Lois, untying her, and she actually comes in and she says, "Look, I know Trask is a madman, but I'm done being his thug. I'm not going to be that guy, that person anymore. So, this is why I'm rescuing you." So it's a little bit more information on her, a little more stand up, for her character. Like, she's fighting back. She's tired of being used as a pawn. I thought that was good. It's too bad they had to cut that out. It's just like a line or two. They should have kept that in there to give her a little bit more of a backbone, I guess, It
was obvious that she was going to come and save them.
Exactly. And then right after that, Lois pulls out a cell phone from her purse, and Sherman makes a throwaway comment. She's like, "Does that actually work out here?" And that's when she calls Jimmy and that whole thing. So I guess, it was like the X-Files when they had their cell phones, and it was the bigger cell phones. And, so I guess, I don't know why they cut that, but she uses a landline instead of a cell phone.
Yeah, she uses like one of those portable military phones or something, right?
Right, yeah, exactly.
All right, well, I guess that means it's quote vote time. Let's get into it.
All right.
What's everybody standing around for? This is a newspaper, not happy hour at Buckingham Palace. What are we here, the Daily Planet, or second stringers from the Weehawken Gazette?
Am I making myself perfectly clear?
All right, so we got a few votes this week, so let's just dive straight into it. Cue the music.
Sean Connery and Mr. Movie Trailer walk through a carnival. I did not check this out before I read it.
Just trying something new.
Awesome.
Maybe we can get an early taste of the local hospitality.
You go ahead. I think I'll hang around and soak up the atmosphere.
Oh, come on. You know, what you can't stand is how normal it is here.
Normal? I've heard about these small towns. See Mr. Regular Joe flipping hamburgers? I bet you he's a cross-dresser.
Really?
Kermit the Frog approaches.
Sean!
Kermit!
Oh, gosh, it's good to see you. Oh, you must be Mr. Movie Trailer.
Yeah, that's me. Hi, Mr. Frog.
Oh, Kermit, please. Well, you sure are pretty. It's all right if I tell him that, isn't it, Sean?
I don't know, Kermit. Ask Mr. Movie Trailer.
Thanks, Kermit.
You kids must be hungry. Let's get you something to eat off the barbecue.
Oh, wait, I don't know, Kermit. Mr. Movie Trailer thinks that the cook might be a cross-dresser.
Oh, honey, that's Sean's father. I can't get him to buy a dress for me, let alone himself. Yay!
All right. And
scene.
Oh, God.
Do you like my Mr. Movie Trailer voice?
It's not bad. It's a little Batman-ish, I'm gonna say. I think eventually when iReactions comes on as his guest starring role, he said he has a good Dark Knight Batman impression. So I think this will be good. This will be good. I like it.
All right, well, getting into our second episode discussion today. The episode is The Man of Steel Bars, written by Paris Quales?
I'm glad you get to do it.
Always get stuck with these names.
Yes.
Butcher them. And directed by Robert Butler. Yeah, that one's a bit easier. And this originally aired November 21st of 1993.
I got you, babe, but there's no need to worry about the power supply. It's completely under control.
Ladies and gentlemen, if I may, the mayor has asked me here today to assure you that the LexCorp nuclear plant is 100% prepared to meet your energy needs. Isn't the Environmental Impact Committee withholding final approval on the plant pending the results of its safety inspections? Not anymore. The report right here, I'm pleased to announce that we passed with flying colors. Metropolis needs power. I have it to give.
Mr. Mayor, another power source is helpful, but it's not going to solve the problem. Where is the heat coming from?
We've been studying all meteorological phenomena in the area, the jet stream, the ozone layer, even sunspots. But all patterns have remained consistently normal.
Why only Metropolis? It's 12 degrees in New York, and there's 8 inches of snow in Chicago, and we're having a run on sunblock.
Excuse me, pardon me. We have a theory.
It's merely speculation at this point, Dr. Saxon.
What theory?
It has not been proven, and I don't...
We have a right to know what is causing this extreme condition.
Not what. It's who.
It's merely a hypothesis, and one I do not agree with.
Who? Dr. Saxon, on behalf of the citizens of Metropolis, I demand to know who that person is.
Yes. We demand it, right?
Superman.
Metropolis faces record-setting high temperatures that continue to rise apparently every time Superman performs a super feat, resulting in the courts setting an injunction against him using his powers for fear of more rising temperatures. Superman agrees to leave the city after showing that he can't stop doing good deeds and saving people, and Clark decides to leave the planet to return to Smallville to become an editor, despite Lois's protests. A scientist that Lois and Jimmy asked for help analyzing their data on the location of Superman's super feats versus the rising heat spots comes forth and reveals that the waters below Metropolis are overheating. As it turns out, it has all been a plan by Lex Luthor to rid his city of the Man of Steel by letting waste from his newly approved nuclear power plant leak into the aquifers under the city every time Superman performs a heroic act, thereby increasing the temperature of the city. Lois appeals to Superman on live TV, and he returns to stop the powering up of the nuclear plant, costing Luthor millions in damages as well as having to clean up the leak. Clark returns to the Daily Planet and is accepted without question back into the fold as life returns to normal once again.
Good afternoon, Mr. Superman.
Just Superman, Your Honor.
That's your full name?
That's what people call me.
Fine. Make it one word. I understand you've refused counsel?
I'd like to speak for myself, Your Honor.
Superman, I have to tell you right up front, I'm a big fan of yours. A lot of the lowlifes you catch end up here. And what you're doing in my courtroom is unfortunate. And between you and me...
Objection, Your Honor.
You can't object, Patricia, because this isn't a trial. Superman, do you know why the city attorney dragged you in here?
The theory is that my powers may be causing the city's peculiar heat wave.
Well, what do you think?
I don't think it's true, but if Metropolis is worried about me using my superpowers, I'd like to put the fears to rest.
All right. I'm going to grant this injunction pending further scientific study. Superman, you are hereby ordered to cease and desist all super activity until further notified. Do you wish to contest?
I'm just as anxious as anyone else to discover the source of this heat.
No super activities of any kind. Flying, the visual thing, nada. Comprende?
I'll do my best.
All right, people, we got a deal.
All right, so let's get into our investigation.
All right, so I picked this up here, and I'm not sure if it's a reference or not, but they talk about Dr. Goodwin in this episode, and Archie Goodwin was actually like a DC editor. So I'm not sure if they were referencing him or not. It's hard to tell some of the references because they are like normal names, you know? They're not like distinctive names necessarily. Yeah, they had Carlin Building, and I forget the name of the street that they had said. But, you know, those are kind of obvious in the history of Superman. Goodwin, I'm thinking, well, maybe it is, but maybe it's just a name that the writer wrote. You know, it doesn't have to be a reference. Maybe we're reading into it a little bit more than we should. Like when we said Cleveland in the pilot, I'm like, well, yeah, that is where Superman was technically born by his writers, you know, but is it a reference or is it just a random name? You know, it's like, who knows? Like today it's very intentional when you watch these superhero shows, but back then, was it intentional? I'm not sure.
It makes you hope that, you know, if they're just going to mention some person who we're never going to meet,
right,
that they would just take a name of a writer or an editor or something of the comic and just throw their name in there.
Yeah, so hopefully it was a reference, you know, not just made up. But I was like, oh yeah, I remember him, you know, because I used to read when I read the comics, I would even read the letters page and you know all those little editor notes. I'd be like, oh okay, I remember his name. The original opening had kids trying to fry an egg on a sidewalk, which I don't know if that actually would have worked, you know, because it wasn't that hot. Because, I mean, believe me, it gets hot here in Phoenix, and we're not frying the eggs on the sidewalk anywhere near here. So. There was also a scene, like, right there in the opening as they pan around. There was going to be a near-naked snow cone vendor, which I don't think anybody wanted to see. No one needs to see that.
Would have been like the naked world on Sliders.
Exactly.
He's like, thank God Arturo didn't disrobe.
Right, exactly.
We don't need to see that.
Let's see. There was Christmas music was supposed to be playing. There were signs that they were focusing on that said, only 20 days left for Christmas, and there was a Santa on the corner ringing a bell, sweating like crazy. So it was just really hammering it in that it was Christmas time.
Yeah, I think it was good enough when Lois just says, geez, it's November and it's like 95 degrees. What's going on?
Exactly. There was some extra dialogue when Superman goes to save the guys underground. The foreman says, there's a transformer that's going to go down, blow up if it hits the gas line. So just a little throwaway line there. Like, they don't actually show that in the script or anything. It's just, you assume that he goes and stops the transformer from falling down. There was a scene. This was great. Now, the scene in the police station was already good, the way they handled it, but they were going to have more in there. They were going to be asking him for his ID, like he's like, I'm supposed to take all your belongings, anything in your pockets, your ID. And he's like, well, everybody kind of knows who I am. It's like, yeah. Good point.
My spandex doesn't really have pockets.
Exactly. This leaves nothing to the imagination, officer. And then he's like, the sheriff or the police chief or something is like, all right, I don't know who's going to give him the pat down, And then one of his officers says, not me. I've got 30 days till pension. Forget it,
2 days to retirement.
Exactly. And then, Superman's like, I assure you, I don't have anything dangerous on me, Like, okay, fine. Let's get your fingerprints. And they actually go to take his fingerprint. And I know why they obviously they cut this out because it'd just be ridiculous. He went to go take his fingerprint. And when he puts his finger on, he gets the ink on it and he pushes it on the card, instead of it breaking the desk like in the episode, when they look at the card, there's no fingerprint. It's just a black smudge.
Oh, okay. He doesn't have fingerprints.
He doesn't have fingerprints, which is kind of like, no, I guess maybe because he's Kryptonian, maybe they don't have fingerprints, but it's just, it wouldn't really make sense, I think, to most people.
He's still humanoid. On Krypton, they don't have superpowers.
Right.
It's being on Earth that changes his Kryptonian makeup, right?
Right. And then you gotta, if they do get his fingerprints, then you gotta figure, what about Clark? His fingerprints are going to be the same. So by getting rid of that little scene, they sort of get rid of a lot of problems they might have later on.
Yeah, let's just make a gag out of it where he breaks it instead.
Exactly.
Moving on.
In the court scene, Perry's talking about being, unbiased and all, and Lois says, well, we could get a lawyer for Superman. He's like, oh, he's doing fine on his own. Don't worry about it. iReactions said, it's Perry being a cheapskate. It's like, we can't pay for a lawyer for this guy. Lois is asking Jimmy for more maps. Like, she's like, I want all different kinds of maps. Give me the Landsat, geothermal, meteorological maps. I want street maps. I want it all because there might be some connection here. Just grasping at straws, basically. And then I couldn't remember. I should have looked it up. But the bit where Perry is talking to Superman, and he's talking about Nixon and all that, and Perry does a little Nixon impression there.
Yeah, I grabbed that soundbite for our quick impression segment.
So that was actually not in the script, so it was likely an ad lib by Lane Smith there, and he actually did play Nixon in a movie.
Ah, there you go.
It was in let's see, it was in 1989 as a docudrama called The Final Days. So there you go. I might actually have to look that up to see if you can watch it on YouTube or something. It'd be neat to see that. Also, we've got a script error because Superman, he's the one who says, well, why don't I stay with Clark? And then Perry says, well, where is Clark anyway? And Lois says, oh, he called in his piece and he was headed home. And then Perry goes, Superman, that okay with you? And he's like, well, yeah, Clark seems like a nice guy. It's like, well, but you yourself said that, why don't you stay with Clark? Why are you asking him?
It's Superman's idea.
Yeah, it's your idea. What are you doing, Perry? And then iReactions noted that it's different in the Reeve and Brandon Routh movies, where Superman doesn't really know who Clark Kent is. Like it comes up a couple times where Clark is mentioned, Superman will go, Clark? Like he doesn't really know who he is. Just part of the the disguise, basically, in those movies. Whereas here, obviously, Superman seems to know Clark.
It's a weird thing to play off, really, isn't it? Because if Superman did know Clark, then you think after a while people would be like, I've never seen you two in the same room.
Exactly.
Like, if you two know each other, then what's going on here?
Exactly. That's what I tell people all the time. I'm not saying I'm Batman. but me and Batman have never been in the same room together. So take that for what it is.
That's a great joke.
There was a scene, which is, you could totally see this scene happening, of Clark on the phone with his parents, telling them, no, you don't need to come. I'll be fine. They're like, we know you're fine. We just want to be there to support you. And it's like, no, don't come. So when they actually show up in the episode, there was like a precursor to that scene that we didn't see.
It's a bit throwaway, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Clark was supposed to actually block Lois from coming into the apartment when she finds out Superman is there, but instead he's sort of like, awkwardly doesn't do anything. He just sort of like moves aside as she, busts her way in, And our reactions know that he can't imagine Dean like actually physically trying to block her, because it's just not his character, so it's good the way it turned out. We get to actually see Superman stopping the runaway train that Lex had. What was going to be neat about it was, as he's stopping the train, I think this would have been a neat scene, he's pushing against the train to slow it down, and then superimposed over that was going to be a thermometer with the heat rising in the thermometer, which I thought that'd be cool. That would have been neat. There was a scene with Clark on the bed listening to the radio, and they're saying, the news announcer is like, authorities have given Superman till noon to surrender, and Clark sort of looks off to the side and he sees the Superman costume hanging there in the closet, and that's when he gets up and decides to go turn himself in. When Jimmy brings in the maps to Lois, basically he had a lot more maps, like a ton of maps, and he puts them down on her desk, and someone turns on a fan across the way and it scatters them all over the place, and they get them mixed up, and then two of them get stuck together, and Jimmy's like, oh, sorry, that's the jam I had last night, or something like that. And two of the maps got stuck together. And when they're stuck together, she notices the connection between the two, kind of like what we saw in the episode, but a more convoluted way to get there.
Yeah.
And she's like, Jimmy, go check these, and cross-reference them together. And so he's off doing that. The third time, there's going to be a third time when Superman was going to go back to court. This time, it was going to be in the judge's chambers. So with that judge again, and she's saying, look, I don't think we can get this to trial. can we do a plea bargain, And the prosecutor is like, well, Superman has to leave and never come back for life, and the judge is like, for as long as that is, because probably going to live forever, and Superman agrees to it. And, the judge says, look, if you do come back, I will have to put you in jail, and I'll call in the Marines to keep you there. It's like that would even stop him. But still, it was just an interesting little scene there. The article that Clark wrote for the paper that was so like emotional, about the boy throwing the toy, it was actually even more dramatic, if you can imagine. If you seek out the scripts, because there's tons of links out there for the scripts, it's a much more dramatic reading, and people are tearing up as they read it. So. It's a little unnecessary, but because we got the point with what was in there.
That kid was a little turd anyway.
Yes, we'll talk about it, I'm sure. Anytime a child actor comes up, be assured, listeners, we will talk about it. Let's see. Clark says he's leaving, not because he's going to be the editor, but that he can't live in a place that would vilify someone for doing the right thing. That's why he's leaving. He's just disillusioned with the city, And he gives Lois a letter, but it's for Lois. This says Lois on it, not for Perry. It's not his resignation, so we don't really know what's in it. There's a sad montage of Clark walking the street, looking up at signs for Superman to stay, Superman to go. He sees a fight break out, and he wants to go stop it, but he decides not to because of his powers. And a cop eventually comes over and stops it. Oh, and then there was a long explanation about why the city was getting hot. The explanation we got was very good, very simple. But originally, it was supposed to be this long explanation about the element bismuth being underneath Metropolis. It's just an inert element. But once it's exposed to radiation, it becomes polonium. And polonium is what has been raising the heat in the city. And the biggest concentration of polonium is under the power plant. So just a lot more, it's just more involved, a little more convoluted. I think the way they went with it was better.
Yeah, well, and you'd think, like, if they were going to build a nuclear power plant, they would test the ground and everything and go, hey, there's like a whole bunch of bismuth here. If we build a nuclear power plant on this land, then the whole thing would blow up.
Exactly. The scene where the reporter switches gears halfway through and starts to say, Superman, where are you when we need you? That wasn't in the script. So it was him, just continually not being happy about Superman. So it doesn't really switch gears. Clark and Pa are packing up his stuff into a car, and then Ma Kent comes down and says, "You got to see the TV. Lois needs you." Da, da, da. So they cut that out because he didn't really need that. You know that he's going to see it. Lois tells Lex, when they go to the press conference, and he's like, there's no leak, and Lois says, well, there has to be a leak somewhere in your plant unless someone was purposely causing the bismuth to turn into polonium. And Lex is like, Clark or Superman is like, and who would do that, I wonder, and Lex is like, well, that's unthinkable. Let's find that leak, It's like, oh, yes, well, we'll take care of it. There is a leak, actually, I'm sure. There was more destruction when Superman enters the core. Instead of just pushing that post up, he actually rips things apart, destroys a couple things. And then Lex, he laments a little bit longer at the end. He's sort of down about all the things that happened and the power plant and whatnot. But he starts talking about how insurance won't cover the loss. This is a big environmental clause that was in there, so I can't get the payout on that. And the city experts want him to pay for all of this and all of that, just a lot more stuff, and he's mad about the bonus he had to pay to the doctor for his assistance in the leak investigation. So it just goes on a little bit longer, like, woe is me, and it ends the same way as the episode did. And then finally we got Lois and that letter that Clark gave her. She never opens it up, and what happens is Clark just takes it back from her, and she's like, I didn't read it, and she's wondering what's in it. He goes, it's okay, it doesn't matter now. Also in that scene, that boy that you love so much was supposed to come to the planet. Someone points him to where Clark is, and he asks him, can you please write an article saying that I'm sorry? I apologize for everything, for what I did to Superman. And Clark's like, oh, he knows.
Slaps the kid and tells him to piss off.
Get out of here, kid. You bother me.
What are you doing?
I'm leaving Metropolis.
Oh, Clark, I'm a little too tired for jokes.
It's no joke.
Leaving? As in quitting?
I'm going to work for the Smallville Post, managing editor. I guess I'm just not cut out for big city life.
Well, nobody's cut out for big city life. That's what makes it so exciting.
Look, I know there's no good time to...
We're in the middle of a crisis. Superman is on the line and you're out of here?
I just wanted to say goodbye.
Goodbye? We're partners.
You don't need a partner, Lois. You never did.
Well, maybe not. But I was starting to like having one. So, are you planning on giving notice?
This is for Perry. I was wondering if you might give it to him for me.
I get it.
You do?
Well, it's obvious, Clark. Nobody gives up a great job in the middle of the night because they have the chance of a lifetime to edit the Smallville Gazette.
Post.
Or whatever. This isn't about a job. Did you really think I hadn't figured out what it was about you and Superman?
What do you mean?
You idolized the man, Clark. And now he's in trouble and you share his pain. Look, we all feel bad about Superman. But the only way to make it right is to fight like crazy. Don't give up on him because he wouldn't give up on us.
Maybe you don't know him as well as you think you do, Lois.
This is stupid, Clark. Go unpack your stuff and let's get to work.
Alright, so let's get into our main story here. It's 96 degrees in November here.
Yes.
For our lead story. It's getting hot in Metropolis.
Everyone's getting hot and bothered.
And we've got this whole thing with the setup. It's hot. The city's running low on power. But, of course, Lex is ready to step in and open up his new nuclear power plant.
Exactly. Just like in the pilot when the space station was having problems. He's like, hey, I've got a space station. Look at that. Just conveniently, Hey, I have a nuclear power plant. You guys need power? I got you covered. Here you go.
I'm not sure he gave it a name this time, though. Was it called, like, LexCorp Nuclear Power or something?
Oh, I don't
think he specified.
So. Yeah, no, I don't think he did.
Lex Nuclear.
Right.
It probably was called something like that.
Yeah.
And there is a theory that it is getting so hot so late into the year because Superman draws his power from the sun, and this may be causing extreme heat. Every time he does a super feat, it's going to get hotter.
As the newspaper says, super feet equals super heat.
So an interesting idea. I can't say I ever remember seeing a story like this in the comics. Do you think this is an original idea, or do you think this was drawn from the comics?
Yeah, I don't remember it either. You know, and I've read a lot of comics, but obviously there's, you know, there's like 7, 80, 90 years or 80 years worth of Superman comics. So I'm sure I've missed at least one. But yeah, I don't remember this ever being a thing. But I like it because it makes sense. Because his powers do come from the sun.
Exactly. It's an interesting idea of taking that little plot point of the fact that it's Earth's yellow sun that gives Superman his powers. So maybe we do this story where it's getting hot because of his powers. And of course, it's going to come around that it's not because of Superman at all. It's Lex Luthor trying to frame him. But yeah, it's still very, I think this might be a clever original idea on part of the series.
Yeah, and actually I should, before I lose my Superman credentials, I should say that his powers weren't always sun-based. Like that's like a more of a modern type reinvention of it. Originally, there were many other explanations why he was so strong. It was because Krypton was just like super advanced. You know, they were so far ahead of us. That's why he had powers. At one point, I think it had to do with gravity. You know, so there were many different explanations why he had powers. So I think that was when they reinvented him back in the 80s. I think that's when they came up with the idea that maybe it's the yellow sun. I think it could have been a little bit before that, but I know that there were different explanations for where his powers came from before.
It's all very interesting, and we've got ourselves a little cameo person here for Dr. Saxon, the person who's throwing out this theory. This is Richard Fancy, and we talked about him back on Sliders. It's a regular Sliders guest host marathon hit this week.
Exactly, yes.
But yeah, he did appear in that one episode, that Please Press 1 episode, which was just terrible.
Oh yeah. It was pretty rough. That was during our downtime, the dark times.
Yeah. And pretty much he's invented this like heat machine or something, right?
Yeah, something that I guess, now I was trying to figure out because I was confused, and I guess we'll get into it as we talk about it, but I guess I figured when he uses that machine, it does something to a leak that sends it into the aquifers. Is that right?
I guess so, yeah. Because by the end, when they started bringing up the aquifer and stuff like that, and he does say at the end that he now has to pay to clean up a leak that he had control over the whole time and stuff. So I guess so.
Yeah, because at first I just thought he pushed some buttons and somehow he had a machine somewhere that just heated up things for some reason, you know? But then when you get to the end, it's like, oh, okay, so there was a leak or there wasn't? Like, I got a little confused, but then I finally was able to figure it out in my mind. I'm like, okay, I think this is what it is. Okay, got it.
Yeah. And then this whole idea of Superman being dragged into court and everything, it's kind of what I remembered, you know, when we were trying to guess what the episodes were about last week.
Right.
It's still that, you know, this whole, can Superman police himself? You know, because obviously there's no force on Earth that can control Superman. It's kind of weaved into this heat story that there is actually a problem that scientists believe may be caused by Superman. So yeah, he's being dragged into court and he's getting like conditions placed on him, you know, stop using your superpowers, we're going to find out what's going on.
I like that he's being seen more and more, you know, with the common guy, you know, like he's down there and he's not just like saving people, but he's talking with them, you know, he's doing the right thing. He's showing his want to do the right thing. You know, he doesn't want to like just be above people. He wants to be a part of it. He wants to live by their rules. He wants to follow, you know, the law. That's what I like because, as we know, Superman has been in court, you know, in the past month or so, and it's totally different thing in the movies, you know, totally different thing. But I like the way this is played off, that he's like, I just want to do the right thing. I will stop using my powers. I'll do whatever, you know, the law says to do.
It's kind of like he's stuck between a rock and a hard place, right? He's been given this injunction. He says he's not going to do it, but then immediately this guy tries to get away. He holds a cop hostage with the cop's gun and everything. Superman, of course, uses his superpowers, his heat vision, to stop the guy. He's immediately violated the injunction, so he is then arrested and thrown in jail.
Now, do you think that guy, that was just random that it happened, or was that a plant by Lex?
I don't know.
I was thinking it was a plant by Lex, but they don't really say it was. But in my mind, I'm like, he always has so many things going on behind the scenes that I could imagine it was.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe if it was developed a bit more, it could have gone into something like that. But as it stands, it just seems, going by the episode, he was just a random guy.
Yeah, well, see, then he's really dumb. I mean, doesn't he know Superman's there in that courthouse? I mean, I'm sure he had some idea. I don't know. There's a lot of dumb criminals in Metropolis.
Yeah, you think it'd be like widely televised and stuff like that. Superman appearing in court. What an idiot. And then, of course, he goes on to be an even bigger idiot when he starts smacking around Superman and stuff like, you can't use your powers. Look at me. And then, of course, he lures him into that trap of making him punch the big dude behind him.
Yes, that was good. That was good.
And, I kind of like this idea as well, that Superman's still going to follow the procedure. He was given an injunction. He violated it. So, yeah, he's just going to go. He'll go to jail. But it's really just symbolic. Right? Yeah. He could just get out of there anytime he wanted to.
It's kind of like, I mean, it's a totally different thing. But in the Man of Steel that came out, a year or so ago, it was, when they arrested him and he had the handcuffs on. And Lois was surprised that he let them handcuff him. He's like, well, it puts him at ease, to know that I'm in handcuffs, even though he can break out, obviously.
It's all really good. I think it's very well told. And then, when he ends up back in the courtroom and, the coffee almost spills on him, so he flies up a bit to sort of get away from it. He's put into the custody of the Daily Planet because Perry gets up and vouches for Superman. Now, I don't know if this is like kind of how courts actually work in a way. I mean, this judge was a bit kooky, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Interesting casting for a judge.
Yes.
But he gets taken by the Daily Planet, and Superman throws out that maybe I'll just stay with Clark.
Right.
Which I thought was good. And led to a great scene where Lois wants to come over and cook food.
Yes, that was pretty good. Makes sense and everything. I was wondering, because I couldn't remember exactly how he pulled this off. Like how would he be in two places? Like he's supposed to be in the shower and, Clark is out there. They just pull the old switcheroo. He never questions why Clark goes into the bedroom, doesn't come back out again though,
Yeah, and she does seem quite nervous, especially when Clark brought up that Superman was in the shower. Did you see him? Does the suit come off?
Yeah, it comes off. Did you look? I didn't look. No, of course not. I wouldn't either. I wouldn't.
Yeah, and then of course Lex is going to try and bait Superman again, so he causes this out of control train that, of course, Superman can't resist. He has to go and save them. That's what he does. That leads to Superman having to agree to leave Metropolis.
This was a good scene. This was a good little scene here, with not just with Superman saying it, but I'm thinking more of the Clark end of things.
It's funny how they brought it all together. Like this idea where he's just like, well, maybe I could give up being Superman or something like that. But all this evidence is pointing towards, well, maybe he is causing it, and he just cannot decide. Even his parents show up and say, like, please, you grew up in Smallville. Nothing ever happened there. To which he says, well, now I'm actually using my powers a lot. I go out, I save people all the time. I'm doing a lot of things with my powers. So maybe that's
major
it.
things.
So, yeah, Clark has no choice too, but to decide he is going to leave, quote unquote, take a job at the Smallville, Gazette or the Post or something.
Yeah, it's the Post, remember? That's what Clark said to Lois. It's the Post, Lois. Anyway, he can't just stay and not use his powers, is another thing he said, because if he sees something going wrong, he wants to take care of it.
Yeah, no, I really liked it. And of course, developing that Clark and Lois relationship. She is genuinely upset that Clark is leaving.
Exactly. And there's something that happened. I was like, oh wait, is this that moment? But it's not. There was when Superman is saying goodbye to Lois, he puts his hand on her cheek, and then when Clark goes to kiss Lois later, he puts his hand on the cheek as well, the same cheek. And I thought maybe that would trigger something, in her memory, that Superman did the same thing. I think that comes into play in a later episode when we get closer to the end of the season. I believe. I'm not positive, but I think that's something that I'm not positive though.
Now you're saying it, I kind of am getting a vivid memory of her realizing that Superman is Clark after a kiss, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm not sure when it comes, because there's a lot of ups and downs with the whole getting close to knowing who he is thing. But yeah, I think it happens at some point.
But good stuff. Really good stuff.
All the listeners are probably like, it's in this episode, you idiots. You know, it's like, sorry, we'll get there.
Yes. I know we're called the Rewatch Podcast, but it's been a long time since we first watched it. Jeez.
Exactly.
Yeah, but of course, you know, Lois figures the whole thing out. There's another random doctor who didn't agree with what's-his-face, the Saxon's theory, and she kind of helps out Lois, and they figure out the whole LexCorp nuclear leak down in the aquifer. And I have to say, that woman says aquifer like 5 times across like 2 sentences. It was really getting annoying.
You know, I did notice that. There was something weird about the line. And I'm like, that's what it was. I didn't think of it. I couldn't figure out what it was, but that's what it is. It's a big word, you know. It's a good word to use, I guess.
Yeah, and I like the again, you know, the sprinkling in of the comedy where they cut to the guy from Channel 6 doing the report, you know, good riddance, Superman is gone, and
right.
It's all good. Lois busts in, says, Superman, we figured it out, I know you'll see this come down. She takes off again, and then of course the news guy comes back and goes, yeah, Superman, where are you when we need you?
They all start booing him.
Booing him.
No, iReactions had a note here that he was thinking about this episode here when Lex got his comeuppance. He said really he thinks that the lawsuits that would have stemmed from that realistically would probably have bankrupted Lex Luthor, because there would have been a class action lawsuit likely because of, you know, causing the heat to go up in the city, and then of course all the nuclear waste that would have been going on. Like, he just would have been like in litigation for like years and just paying tons of money. So realistically, he said that'd probably be, you know, his downfall right there.
But they do kind of just weave that silver lining thing in about the 2,000% profits in the air conditioning department.
They have to end it on a high note for Lex, you know. He's got to still be standing tall, despite the bad things that have happened. Like they sang, they look for the silver lining.
Can't get rid of Lex this quickly.
Right.
And then, of course, Clark returns to the Daily Planet, and Perry didn't even read his resignation. Didn't feel that he had to.
This is where you belong, kid.
Yeah, and Lois saying, like, you know, it was hot. I think Perry said it was hot. We were all a bit stir crazy, and then Lois said, "I knew you couldn't leave. I knew you couldn't get away from what was happening here. You idolized Superman, obviously. So when he was hurt, you were hurt." And
right.
She's still not quite putting it together.
Exactly. Oh, she'll get there.
But I really enjoyed it. Okay, some bylines here. We had another cameo, the mayor of Metropolis, played by Sonny Bono.
I like this.
It was really funny, actually, because I brought up the episode on IMDb, because I just saw that we had some guest stars. Didn't realize that the mayor was played by Sonny Bono. So I saw that little bit of trivia, so I pressed play on the thing. Had everything set up, and then immediately I see the mayor there, and I'm like, oh, okay, it is Sonny Bono, that's right. Immediately he says to Lois, I got you, babe.
Exactly.
And I was like, oh, okay. I did think that was a weird line the first time I watched it. But,
well, now there's another one right before that you barely hear. It happens like right as soon as he comes on, and the reporters are shouting. He goes, "Hey, the heat goes on," you know, because he has a song called "The Beat Goes On" with Cher. So yeah. And then this episode had a lot of musical references, because later on, when they're in the jail cell, you talked about the guy who was like slapping Superman. When he goes, "Oh look, I'm tugging on Superman's cape." That's a reference to a Jim Croce song, and I just lost the title of it in my head, but there's a Jim Croce song where he mentions, you know, you don't tug on Superman's cape, you don't do, you know, this to this person, you know, it's part of his lyrics. That's another reference right there.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, a lot of musical stuff here in this episode, because we got the singing at the end too. So you see,
it's true.
we're this much closer to an actual new Superman Broadway show.
Yay! That would be awesome.
Now, something that I felt a little odd about was at the very beginning when the kids are out there and they're trying to open up the fire hydrant, and Clark walks over and says, "Hey, look, an elephant," you know, and they all look, and then he quickly unscrews it and lets the water come out. I understand why he's doing it, okay? And I know that I've seen things where kids have played in fire hydrants before, but it seems like that's something that's supervised by, like, you know, the police or the fire department. Instead, it looks like the kids are just trying to open it up on their own. And to me, doesn't this seem like this would be like an act of vandalism, maybe?
It's true. You just flood the street that way.
Yeah.
Cause a lot of infrastructure damage.
Yeah, no one's supervising it. And what the heck happens if there's a fire? you know, and they're just letting the water come out so they can play. I was like, a little sketchy there. It's like, go home, Superman. Don't be messing around with our water.
I also noted Lex playing with his model train, I guess, because we never actually see the out-of-control train.
No,
we just hear that it's happening, and
Yep.
they use this model train as a way to sort of set up that Lex has set this up.
Yeah, it was probably a way to save money, you know, so they didn't have to do another effect shot.
Yeah, exactly. But this whole thing of him playing with the model train and then the little model Superman.
Yes.
I don't know. I thought it was very weird that he just this is what he does when he's alone, you know. You're like, this guy's bizarre.
Exactly.
Also, all the excuses why Clark wasn't around when Superman was at the Daily Planet and so on.
Yeah, it worked out good, you know, because that's his job. He has to be there at the courtroom, so why not just say he's there?
Yeah, he's at the courtroom, and then he uses his one phone call to call Perry and say, "It's all right, Chief. I'm at the police station. It's all good.
Yeah,
I'm
don't go
covering the
anywhere."
story." Later, when Superman's in the office talking to Perry, and Lois sticks her head in, and Perry says, "You got to get on this, Lois. I mean, we're short-staffed. Clark even called in with heat exhaustion." And you're like,
yeah.
Oh man.
Well, the worst one was, I mean, they were all okay, but the worst one was when they were at the apartment, and he blows the door shut and says, "Oh, Clark's on his way already." You know, to wherever they were going, to the train or whatever it was, because it's like, come on, Clark would have waited. You know, he wouldn't have done that.
Yeah, I don't know. They were, like, a few of them were a stretch, but you know, what can you do? You got to do something, right?
Exactly.
And yeah, well, speaking of which, Perry talking Elvis with Superman. I mean, he just doesn't care, really.
I know, more musical references here with Elvis.
Another point I've just written here: I don't need another douchebag kid.
That kid was weird.
Don't need that kid in this episode. Don't need
Now,
it.
was he mad because Superman was leaving, or was he mad because Superman was causing the heat and couldn't follow the rules?
I don't know. I don't care. He just
I
comes
know.
in, throws that Superman doll or whatever it was at Superman, and then storms off. And I'm like, that kid's just a little shit. Like, to hell with that kid.
See, I when I posted up about the new episode that just came out with Smart Kids, I put something about it in the Zoomway forums. I said in which Cory talks about his love for child actors, so they know where you're coming from by this point.
Yeah, he also had a really 90s haircut too. Did you get a lot of that haircut? Woof.
Definitely dates it a little bit.
Yeah, I definitely had one of those haircuts. I know my mum made me get one of those when I was a kid. Okay, another point. I don't know if you noticed this. I thought it was weird. It's a scene where Clark leaves the Daily Planet after he says goodbye to Lois, and he picks up the box and he walks out. There's like a random maintenance guy there, like turning light bulbs or something. And I'm like, why is that guy in the shot? Like, is it like someone on set was like doing the dressing still, and they kind of just forgot he was there?
Yeah, I did not see that, so that's interesting.
Yeah, it was just a bizarre thing. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe he was just in the shot. And they're like, well, we got to use it. It fits, whatever.
It kind of stuck out to me. I'm like, the office is empty. No one's around. But then when we turn the camera around to see Clark walk out, random maintenance guy there.
Right.
Okay, random. Okay, Lex's Superman knock-knock joke with Nigel.
Yes.
And Nigel's reaction to it.
It was very droll, sir.
Superman who? Exactly.
Nigel is like the ultimate yes man, isn't he? You know, like whatever Lex wants, you know, he's like, very good, sir, very funny, very droll. You are so great, Lex. You are awesome. Now, Nigel, you remember, he was in that episode where they were testing Superman's powers out, and they didn't reference him by name in the episode, but in the script, I think it was Jeffrey, I think is what his name was, so they changed that. So he takes over now. I guess Asabi is just gone, and Nigel is the new right-hand man. Asabi was there just like an episode or two ago, and now he's just gone, and Nigel seems to be the new guy.
Well, I think I remember saying that in that episode, where I was like, what, Lex has like two side men? Nigel and Asabi? It was weird. So I guess maybe they came to a decision where they're like, we don't need two.
Right. And maybe, I don't know, maybe there was something about Asabi like being offensive racially to that culture. I don't know. Because, you know.
Who knows?
It's possible, you know. it's possible. But I like Nigel, and I remember he was a big part of the season and going forward. And I was like, yeah, I like that character. So I'm interested, remembering where it all goes.
Yeah. I am kind of interested because I don't quite remember what Nigel's deal was. Like, why?
Right.
Yeah. Why does he work for Lex?
All right, and then finally, there was another note from iReactions about the article that Clark wrote. He said it's a great article and well written, and obviously, it touched people, who were reading it. But he said it really never would have made it into the paper written that way because there was too much of Clark in the article. Like he put too much of his own thoughts, and opinions into it rather than just basing it on the facts. Like you would normally report on what you see, and what you hear, whereas his article had more stuff like, trying to describe the emotions that were involved in it. And he said that probably wouldn't have made it into the paper because iReactions works with this type of thing in real life. That's his job, So it's like, yeah,
a real reporter stays impartial.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I never really thought about that, but you're right. Yeah, it is quite a heartwarming sentiment kind of thing, isn't it?
Exactly. But reporters don't have to worry about capturing an audience's attention, in the prime time. So we can give it a little bit of room there, a little bit of slack.
But at the end of the day, I think another solid episode here. 2 solid episodes in a row.
Yeah, both of these.
Yeah, very enjoyable.
The plant's a total loss. And the city wants me to pay all the cleanup expenses for a leak that I had completely under control until Superman decided to save the day. Not only did he have the pleasure of totally dismantling my plant, but the radioactivity didn't even affect him. What more gloom do you have to bring to my attention?
Well, sir, I thought you'd be rather pleased to hear that the LexCorp Air Conditioning Division did make a 2,000% profit over the last 3 weeks.
Look for the silver lining whene'er a cloud appears in the blue. Remember somewhere the sun is shining.
All right, well, let's get into the back issue, shall we?
All right. Once again, we don't have much yet. There's not a lot from 1993 yet. It seems like once we get to 94, I think we're going to find some more stuff. Like you said, it's just real early yet for the internet. I found this one that came out a couple months after this episode was aired, and I picked just this one because he was talking specifically about this episode or the one with Trask, the green glow of home. So basically, he was talking about Lex Luthor getting his hands on kryptonite, and he was talking about how, well, really the only guy with, access to the substance is Trask. But he's like, actually, no, he's dead. So the only people who know about kryptonite are the people who were working for Trask. Like, I wonder how much Trask, told his, fellow compatriots there about the connection between the kryptonite and Smallville, how it works and everything like that. Because if some of his people know, then maybe Lex Luthor finds those people, or maybe they go to Lex Luthor trying to get a payoff, and that's how Lex Luthor becomes aware of kryptonite. That's how he becomes aware of Superman have a secret identity, because once he knows that there's kryptonite in Smallville, he's smart enough to remember, or to figure out that Kent came from Smallville, and he would make those connections, basically. So they were wondering about that connection there, which I thought, well, that's pretty cool back in the day to think like that.
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting thought of, like, this guy or whoever it is writing this piece is really thinking about where the show is going to go.
Exactly.
And how Luthor is going to play into this, because Luthor's going to get his hands on some kryptonite at some point.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, very cool.
I always wondered, and I thought, well, not always, ever since we started the rewatch, I wondered, it would have been neat to see if Lex Luthor was behind Trask as well. We don't ever get that connection, but, like, I could totally see him having his hands in every little pie. Like, that's just how he operates.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Right.
Okay, so personal ads, just a little bit here.
Yeah, just a little bit. iReactions posted in the Zoomway forums, where that conversation's going on pretty good over there. He noted that the pig, that I was like, what the hell's this pig about? Why is the pig there? He said in the script it says that, I guess, the pig is supposed to be Amy's pet. but somewhere in the editing of the episode that line got cut out or something. I was like, oh, well, all right, I guess that works. Whatever. You know?
So instead, it's just the kids randomly have a pig.
Exactly.
For no reason.
For no reason. They had a pig wrangler on the set. Might as well use them, I guess. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention was I was recently cleaning out some stuff here and transferring old cassette tapes to digital, putting them onto my computer. So I was doing that, and I discovered an old little skit that I did back when I was a junior in high school. So I was like 17, and it's basically a ballad opera of the death of Superman. I think it's like 10 minutes. And if you like the quote vote, if you like that, and you think the impressions are just god-awful, you're gonna love this little ballad opera that I did. A ballad opera is basically an old type of musical. I can't remember now if it's in the 1800s or a little bit later, but basically it was a comedic thing, a comedic musical where the songs were based on popular songs at the time. And so it would make a comment on something going on in the world, in that part of the world, and use these songs to translate that, the funniness of that, the funniness, whatever. So mine was a take on the death of Superman, and it has some songs in there that were kind of popular at the time. There's Michael Jackson's Bad, and the song by Cher. Actually, I think it's called the Shoop Shoop song. It's in His Kiss or something like that. So that's in there. And there's a couple other older songs in there as well. But the idea is that all these superheroes are mourning the death of Superman. And I play just about all the superheroes that are in there. It's something. Let me tell you. To go back to hear my 17-year-old me, I mean, it's more than 20 years later, and I'm like, oh gosh, some of the choices I made are interesting, but there are some good comedic bits. I think. Just wait till you hear The Flash. My impression of The Flash, and Aquaman, I think, is dead on. So just wait till you hear these things. I got it transferred to the computer. I just got to clean it up, try to take out some of the noise, and then we will post it up on the Facebook page for you guys to hear. So you got to go to the Facebook page and like the page and listen to it. I think you'll get a kick out of it. I did, re-listening to it. I'm like, oh man, this is something else. So, yeah, just you wait. Be ready. And it should be up by the time this airs. I should have it up already. Or I'll put it up right when this episode comes out or something like that.
I'm really looking forward to this. This should be interesting.
Oh, it's good.
If you didn't listen to us do Sliders, I mean, you even managed to put together a nice rendition of Tears in My Fro.
Oh, that's right.
For that podcast, which I thought was great. So going back more than 20 years to hear some ballad opera that you put together when you were 17, I think, yes, could be in for a bit of entertainment.
Maybe I'll post the Tears in My Fro up to the Rewatch podcast page. Get some people going over there. So yeah, we'll let you know if I do that. So yeah, stay tuned.
Okay, so our next issue will be Pheromone My Lovely and Honeymoon in Metropolis. Now, I think Pheromone My Lovely might be that one that we were talking about the other week.
Yes.
About the spray thing that makes everybody get all horned up.
Right. Yeah, we got mixed up. So this is that one. This is definitely that one. And then Honeymoon in Metropolis. Do you remember this one?
I think I do. It's got something to do with Lois wants a vacation and she can only get the honeymoon suite, and then she uncovers like some mobsters doing mobster stuff. So her and
yes,
Clark have to like hang out in the honeymoon suite together or something, right?
Yes, exactly. Yep.
I'm looking forward to that one.
All right. Well, that is it for this issue of the Rewatch Podcast. Keep up with listener interaction by liking our Facebook page at facebook.com/Rewatch Podcast or facebook.com/Lois and Clark Rewatch. And follow the show on Twitter at Rewatch Pod. Don't forget, you can visit our webpage at rewatchpodcast.podomac.com, which has some of our favorite links there, such as zoomway.net, redboots.net, and folcwiki.com, plus links to our archive of film rewatch episodes.
And remember, you can always write us an email or record a voice message and send it over to the rewatchpodcast@gmail.com. Also, if you've enjoyed the show, please consider giving us a rate and review on iTunes. Very helpful. And you can help support the Rewatch Podcast by heading to patreon.com/rewatchpodcast, where you can make a monthly contribution as little as $1. And we thank you very kindly for that. And of course, we're also up on YouTube. We're really trying to push our YouTube page because we need 100 subscribers so we can get our custom URL set up. So that would be so awesome if you do that. We'll put up links on our Facebook and everything. So like us on Facebook and then come and subscribe to YouTube. That'd be awesome.
Maybe just subscribe, so we can get all the way up to 100. And then if you feel like it, you don't really want to keep subscribing, unsubscribe. Just let's get the URL, and then we'll be happy. We'll be fine.
That'd be awesome. All right. Well, thank you for joining me for these 2 episodes, Tom.
Yep.
And I will just say until next time, what's the matter? Never seen a pair of legs before?
We gotta fly.
The Rewatch Podcast is not associated with Warner Brothers Television, ABC, Gangbuster Films Incorporated, or Roundelay Productions.
Don't believe everything you see on TV.
The use of any and all copyrighted material is only for parody, news analysis, critique, or educational purposes as provided in United States Code Title 17, aka Fair Use.
Let's get legal on this.
Music provided by Kevin McCloud at incompetech.com.
Great shades of Elvis.
Copyright 2016, The Rewatch Podcast.
Where are your beepers? We'll be in touch.
Hi, Rewatch Podcast listeners. I'm Corey.
I'm Tom.
And I'm Nathan.
First off, let me say that we have all had a blast doing the Rewatch Podcast. Every week, we put out another episode for free for you. And although we enjoy these discussions with each other, we truly do this for you guys out there in podcast land.
That's right, Corey. But we are here today to tell you about Patreon. Every week, there are costs involved in podcasting about film and television, including hosting and bandwidth charges, our own personal internet usage, and film or show rentals and purchases. So, we're asking you to become a Patreon supporter.
If you can afford as little as $1 to throw our way per month, it would really help us keep the lights on. And if you want to send $100 our way every month, we wouldn't turn that down either. But it's your choice, and we appreciate the support you bring.
As always, we strive to bring you the best quality shows we can create, and we hope that you enjoy them. So head on over to patreon.com/rewatchpodcast to become one of our patrons and show your support for the Rewatch Podcast.
And if we get enough patrons, we may even be able to produce exclusive content just for the supporters in the form of simply getting episodes before the main feed release, or even bonus film discussion episodes as a thank you for your support. The website again is patreon.com/rewatchpodcast.
Thanks, everyone.